my rules, big moves. Y'all heavy on the tweeting, I'll disappear a whole season like, who said they looking for me? I'ma make you wait for it. Count down for me. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back to Hold My Hills, the Power of Unapologetic Living podcast. I am Dr. Ajax, and it's good to be back. It has been a week since I talked to y'all, and I absolutely missed y'all. I was tired as heck, and I was transitioning into a new job, so it meant that I needed to refocus and center myself, but I'm back. I truly appreciate all of the listeners and people who reached out on Monday because there was no new episode. I apologize, and it will not happen again. It probably will, so just roll with me because I'm human. I definitely felt loved and supported, and I'm going to try to act right. And if I tell you that, I just want you to know I'm probably not, but bear with me. So today's episode is kind of special because we are closing out the series on allies, co-conspirators, and disruptors, which will lead us into the final episode on how Black women present this trauma. And by Black women, I mean me, because I can't speak for you, but I feel like you'll relate to some of it. The beauty of life is that if you keep on living, you'll always have something to talk about. So far, we've talked about how being an ally is a great starting point that leads you to co-conspiracy. And I've talked about how co-conspiracy happens when you've begun the work of taking actionable steps to support marginalized groups. You are then leaning and you're leaning into your learning and you're growing in your support of them. So it's all about taking those steps to deepen your understanding. So this week we're going to dig into leaning into our privilege and using it to support and move obstacles, because that's what being a disruptor is about. One of the things that as I began my career, I remember someone talking to me about, you can be a disruptor and be disruptive, or you can be a disruptor and be productive. And so I want to kind of talk about that a little bit, because sometimes we see people who are disruptors and they're really disruptive to the system in ways that are not beneficial or supportive. And I want you to understand that kind of leans into the performative allyship of it, where you're doing something that you feel like you're shaking the table, but you're actually not. You're just getting on people's nerves. So we're going to try to deepen that understanding today. I want to take us because, I love a good common language. When I think about what a disruptor is, it is somebody who is taking action, and it means often radical steps to challenge and dismantle systemic injustices, particularly those related to racism and sexism. So I want you to think about that, like radical steps, not your everyday kind of things that you do, but things that are going to create a pathway and a change. Because ultimately being an ally is about making systemic change. It's about seeing something that is wrong and knowing that you have to disrupt it in order for people to be successful and be not just tolerated, but celebrated in their spaces and supported. So I'm not going to do a very heavy research this time. I feel like I've given you all enough research leading up to this in regards to allyship and what it means to be an ally, an accomplice, a co-conspirator. So this time I'm not going to throw a bunch of names at you. If you want the names of people to read or to talk to, I will link them in the episode guide. So you'll be able to reach those areas that I use in order to do the research. In listening to feedback, some people told me that they loved that the research was there. And it was good when they wanted to go back to the transcript, but during the session, they felt like it was very heavy on other people's names. And I want to talk about that for a second. The reason that I started this podcast is because going through my dissertation, I realized that lots of people's voices who are prominent in the space about Black lived experience are not Black. And those who are Black are not women. And as a feminist and a Black feminist at that, I truly do believe that intersectionality allows us to see things in a different way. And so I will always try to highlight Black scholars or scholars of color, because I want you to understand that we are doing rich research out here, and you need to know it. You need to know who the people are. You need to be able to follow them, because sometimes the voices that people push forward are not necessarily ours, and they're not necessarily accurate. So I will not bombard you with research, but I will make it available to you. It's all about accessibility. So I'm going to tell you what I think being a disruptor is, and then I'm going to give you a story about being a disruptor and about being disruptive. So follow along. For me, being a disruptor is about using your privilege, and we all have privilege in some way or another, especially as we get to seats at the table that others are not at. So it's about using your privilege to organize and draw attention to racial injustice or any injustice. Like if you're at the table and you're making decisions with people and you can tell that they are not thinking about the totality of a group, that all voices are not present, that it is still very much streamlined into patriarchy or systemic bias, it's your job as a disruptor to say, full stop, let's talk about this. This does not seem right. This does not seem like it's doing the best for all people. And being able to point that out. It's about being a disruptor is about being uncomfortable a lot of the time. It's about being the one who's willing to say something out loud without feeling like you're going to get repercussions, because you're going to get repercussions. People do not like change. People do not want you to highlight that their practices and policies are steeped in racism or bias. So it's going to be uncomfortable. So get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's also about advocacy. You are working consistently to change policies and practices that perpetuate racism. If you have a seat at the table and you see something happening or you hear something happening and you don't say anything, if you're not always at the forefront of that advocacy saying, this isn't right, you've got to use that privilege. So direct action in looking for places to be uncomfortable and then making sure that your advocacy is always at the forefront. Amplification. With amplification, it's about showing those around you that you are actually doing the work. So not just talking about it, not just pushing it out in an email, but consistently working through it. You're using your voice, you're using your privilege. You are bringing in others outside of your privilege in order to support systemic change, which takes us into the last and final part. And this is where I think that a lot of people fall short sometimes in their desire to be a disruptor. Mentorship and sponsorship has to happen, which means you use your privilege, your voice, your resources in order to propel marginalized individuals, either in their careers or their personal endeavors. So if you're doing the work of, you're advocating, you're taking actionable steps, you're amplifying your voice and letting people know, on your platforms that this is what should be happening, but you're not reaching back or to the side and picking people up who are marginalized and bringing them to a seat at the table, and not just giving them a seat at the table, but giving them voice at the table as well. Your work has fallen short and you're not quite yet in that disruptor pattern. So in thinking about that, that's where we're going to spend a lot of our time, is the mentorship sponsorship space, because those are two different things. And a lot of people talk about, what do you do in this space in order to be disruptive? And I think about situations where I'm trying to get in the door of making space for myself, making space for other people. And it was somebody above me or that surrounded me that said, hey, I have membership into this table. Come with me. They spoke my name in rooms that I had never sat foot in. They talked about me in ways that were positive and supportive, that pushed forward not just who I was, but what I wanted to bring to the space. And so in thinking about that, I think about an individual And I've said this before, and I say it frequently to people who ask me. Dr. Karen Richardson definitely was a sponsor for me in a lot of spaces when it came to educational technology, because we called it getting Karen'd, and it was the best way to ever be Karen'd. Is if she was in a room talking about something with a company or an organization and she felt like your skill set was needed in that room, she would pick her phone up immediately and call you. So you knew if Karen's number popped up on your cell phone, you answered the phone, because you knew that she was not just calling to chit chat, but she was calling because she wanted to put you and your voice into places. And so as I began to grow in my career and in my personal spaces, I was like, I want to be that person. I want to be somebody who not only is shaking the table, but is allowing other people to come in and shake the table with me based on who they were, what they could do, what they could bring, or who was connected to them. Because sometimes I think we forget that as we know people, our sponsorship, our mentorship of them is not just of them, but it is of the people who surround them as well. So I'm going to tell this story, and this person will probably kill me when they listen to it, but it'll be okay. One of the things that occurred in a workspace that I had is that I was told that I did not have soft skills and that I needed coaching. And if you know me, you know that coaching is my jam. So I was like, sure, if you're going to pay for an executive coach, absolutely, I'll take it. Because it's not the fact that I don't have soft skills. It's that you don't want me to hold people accountable. Because those are two different things. And so I met this woman who came in to coach me, and she absolutely shaped me into a better leader by allowing me space and opportunity to not just show up, but show up as my authentic self and listen to me and listen to the things that I was thinking about. And I did not realize that she was being a disruptor for me in spaces that I had never thought of. It was a very smooth and very, I can't think of the word that I want to say. I have the word, but it's not coming. It was like a ninja skills. Like we would talk and then doors would open for me. Like when I talked about some of the things that I wanted to do outside of my regular workspace and creating my own business and doing the work of helping other people be successful. She opened doors for me. She connected me with other people. She brought in other avenues that I could think of. And I was like, oh, this is great mentorship. I am loving this. And then one day I realized the space that I'm in that did not necessarily appreciate me or understand me began to soften. And I saw the work that she was doing on the back end in helping people understand who I was and what I wanted. So she was using her privilege and her knowledge of me to make space for me in the space that I was in that she was not in. And it meant a lot to me because people don't have to do that. She could have taken her executive coaching money and been like, you know what? Great girl, you're doing good, and been done. But she not only wanted to shape me, she wanted to shape the space that I was in. And so I appreciate that. And then I think about two individuals who have shown me what a good disruptor is, and they are truly disruptive allies. I'm going to call their names. Carl Hooker and Adam File have been amazing in my life. I met them at ISTE a couple of years ago. I ended up, getting involved with them, and they were able to make space for me in several places through making sure that I was connected to people, but also as I started to grow, watching them be the ed tech leaders that they are and just the great humans that they are, I was able to see what it looked like to be a true ally of people in a marginalized space. And I did not meet them at ISTE. I met them at VISTE when we keynoted. I always get those two confused, VISTE and ISTE, but it's okay. It's, it's my brain. But it was phenomenal. I was on their podcast, and they allowed me to be authentic in that podcast. They allowed me to talk about the struggles of what it's like to be a Black woman in leadership space. And then from there, as we connected in other conferences, and they allowed me into spaces with them, they allowed me in spaces with other people, which then got me into COSIN, and I was able to see lots of disruptors in that space, people who were really doing the work of making space for marginalized people. And I realized that if you look around you and you're not surrounded by disruptors, are you truly being disruptive? Because disruptors make people uncomfortable. And those who are performative don't stay in space with them long. And so I know that y'all are always looking for the tea and the gossip. So I'm going to give you a little tea about what is not a disruptor. Now that I've highlighted 4 people that I feel like have really supported me, and been disruptive in spaces, not just towards me, but to many people. I have a person in my life who believes that they use their privilege in order to bring marginalized voices to a table. This person surrounds themselves with marginalized people and uses them in order to further themselves. As I started to realize that this person was not necessarily a disruptor, but more of a leech, I started to separate myself from them, because it was opportunities where they would speak your name in a room, but it was only if they could come with you. It was never if, hey, this is the best person to do it, or they would call and be like, hey, I have this opportunity. I'd love to hear your feedback. And you'd give them great ideas. You have great thought partnership. And then you'd find out that they spoke your name in a room, but spoke your name in a way of saying, I can get this information from this person, and then I'll just bring it back. And I realized that a lot of times there were people who will use their privilege to steal from you, because sometimes people are colonizers of ideas. And so I want you to be very careful and cognizant of that. Like, being a disruptor, you have to make sure that you're using your privilege for good. You're not using your privilege for to push yourself forward, because there are going to be lots of times that you will not push yourself forward. There will be a lot of times that you get in trouble because you are being disruptive. So those are the stories for today. Come back next week and we'll talk about how all of these things, how as a Black woman, having allies, accomplices, co-conspirators, and disruptors really shape the way that we have we respond to the workspaces and our professional spaces and personal spaces that we are involved in. So remember, every step you take is a testament to your strength and grace. Keep striding forward, hold your head up high, and never forget you've got someone to hold your heels when it's needed. I hope you conquer your world today. Until next time, stay empowered, stay you, and slay in your own personal way.
Yeah, I'ma make you pay